behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Hello and welcome back to the GTM pods. Thank you as always for hanging out with us. This will be a fun conversation. I have known this man for almost a decade now, which is insane. Time flies, but certainly one of the most thoughtful, kind, sort of give first revenue strategists out there. I am joined by my good friend Richard Harris. Richard, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I just want to know something. So 10 years, is that a third of your life? Are you 30 yet?
I am 32 in 2 weeks.
So 10 years, I'm a little bit older, right? Like I'm a couple of decades older.
Impactful for you.
And it doesn't mean I diminish our 10-year friendship. Like it's been amazing. Like I remember you as well when you first came on with Sales Hacker back in the day, and just watching you grow and hearing your story all these years has been fun. And you've always been supportive to me, and I think we've always supported each other, but it's really just been phenomenal watching you as a human just keep making all the right steps. So one day I'd love to talk to you about what mistakes you made, but you made more good ones than bad ones, I think. So
thank you, my friend. And there is a laundry list of mistakes I made, but that'll be for another day. Maybe we'll just do an episode on this we'll just call it Scott's mistakes, and we'll just run through them all.
You know what? Let's just call it everyone's mistakes. And you get like 4 people and we all have to talk about our biggest stupid mistakes. So
that'd be fun.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. And for those who, maybe have never been on LinkedIn or haven't gone to Dreamforce or any of the bunch of conferences that you speak at, quickly on a little bit on Richard Harris. So currently the co-founder of Surf and Sales, which is such a cool organization. I've been lucky enough to go down to Costa Rica with you and the team. You're also the owner of the Harris Consulting Group. You've been running that for, again, more than a decade. And really your whole career has been around helping founders with go-to-market strategies and then teaching individual sales reps how to kind of earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask. Your client list is insane. You've worked with the who's who of SaaS, companies like Zoom, companies like Salesforce, Gainsight, and about 80 other SaaS startups, which is wild. And you live in North California with your wife, Kathy, and your 2 sons, and 2 little puppies as well, two dogs.
Yeah.
What are their names again?
Lola is the oldest. She's a Cavapoo. She's about 6.5 years. And Luna is also a Cavapoo, who is 2.5 years. So they're fun. They're not related in terms of lineage or anything, but they keep us on our toes. And I will tell you, it was the longest sales cycle ever of my kids pushing us to get dogs, because we said for 5 or 6 years we'd never get a dog. We never wanted one, never wanted to deal with it. And then of course we got one, and then 2 years later or 3 years later we got a second one. So kudos to my kids for selling mom and dad on puppies.
They've been learning from dad, learning the tricks of the trade and putting it back on you. I imagine, like most, it's been a huge net positive in your life having Lola and Luna around.
Yeah, we love them. They're so much fun.
I love it. Well, a cool thing that is super topical. There's 2 topical things actually. One is you are releasing your first book, which is crazy to think. You haven't actually put pen to paper yet. I know you do a ton of content on LinkedIn and other sources. You got some great blog posts, but this is the first time you're really distilling it into a book, which I'm super excited to read. I think you said there's one on the way.
Yes, I mailed it yesterday. It was $20 to send it to Canada.
Shit. Yeah, that is one of the downsides of being up here, but I appreciate it, my friend.
I'm happy to do it for you.
Thanks, man. And it's going to be called The Seller's Journey. Go check it out. And maybe let's start there. I mean, it must have been such a difficult process to look back on this incredible career you've had and try and pick out themes that are sort of ever changing, that are applicable uh, now and applicable in 5 years, what are the few things in the book that kind of stand out to you as really, impactful lessons in the book?
Yeah. So the book's kind of almost two parts. First part's about mindset and understanding the sales mindset. And particularly, you know me, I talk a lot about mental health. You and I've had some conversations offline about that kind of stuff. So I really wanted to make sure that that piece was covered because it's tough, right? And it's not, every job is hard, right? A lawyer, a doctor, a marketing person, right? Whatever it is, a truck driver, the garbage person, like the jobs are hard. And I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that piece. And there's some suggestions in there around mental health and, how to be healthy with yourself and stuff like that. The other part of the book is tactical, right? Which is me in general. Like I'm very good at this tactical stuff. So there are things about respect contracts or, how to use the phrase and versus but, when to use it, how to use it. What does it really mean? Negotiating with procurement, right? I've done so much sales in all my career and nobody taught us how to negotiate with procurement, which also dovetails into negotiation in general and how to deliver pricing and how to assign accountability to your prospects. So there's, there's 13 tactics overall, which I'm happy to go into any one here, but that's just my style, is having those tactics. And, wrapped around all that, wrapped around the mental health side and all this is this humanity piece, right? Like the piece that's missing in sales and kind of ebbs and flows is this lack of humanity, right? I think we got back to it a little bit in 2020 with COVID. I think we're drifting away from it again. And humanity is the part that AI is not going to solve, right? It's not going to solve that piece anytime soon. So anyway, so that's the basics of it. But it's your show. Tell me what you want to talk about. I don't need to try and hawk a bunch of books. Not that I would mind, but
No, of course, and I appreciate that. And I know one of the things I really like about you is your openness with talking about the mental game uh, and how important that is. And we all know, like, the mental game is really the only game worth playing. If you don't have that sorted out, your life is not going to be the way you want it, regardless of any success you have, whether you're closing the deal or not closing the deal.
I love that line, by the way. That's a really solid line. Like the mental game's the only one worth playing. Like that's so true. Um, my son just went out for JV tennis this last week and he was struggling mentally. Like he even said he was having it. And then he said to himself, just concentrate on consistency. That's what he told himself. We didn't tell him that. He figured it out. And I was like, that's such a good line. Like that's such a good, like, be consistent. Right. And I was like, that applies everywhere. So yeah. All this mental health is super important.
Yeah. Especially this profession. You mentioned, you
Yeah.
called out, like, every job is hard, but there is an interesting part of sales where there's so much rejection, there's so much up and down that it can be extremely taxing.
We get fired if we don't do the job, right? There's not a lot of jobs where that happens, right? And everybody's job is, at risk, so to speak, but sales is the one that can be immediately impacted, right? And I'm also talking about the founders, right? Like if they can't get sales, they quote unquote get fired. They can't go raise funds. They can't do this thing. Like that's the founder version of quote unquote, getting fired. So it's not just the sales rep, it's everybody. And you and I swim so much in the startup ecosystem. We know this, right? We know this challenge, which is very different than if you go do sales at some big Fortune company. You might get a little bit more of a runway.
Totally. And I want to go back to this theme of kind of humanity. I think that'd be a fun one to wrestle with because, there's a lot of content out there about, leveraging AI. Certainly, every third episode probably on this podcast, we're talking to someone about how they're using artificial intelligence across a revenue organization. And of course, it's going to have a massive impact. But I want to get to your views on kind of why it's more important than ever to infuse humanity throughout the process. But before we get there, you have these 13 tactics. Why don't we tease 3 of the tactics from the book? I think that would be a fun place to start.
Yeah. So a fun one is this little snippet on the words and versus but, right? Like I think we all know that and is additive, but is a negative, right? If you use but, everything you said before that is negated. So like in the competition world, right? It's one thing for me to say, hey, I understand you like company X, but did you know? Well, now I just told them that I don't agree with their reasoning for liking company X. That's not what people want. People want empathy means not being combative. It doesn't mean that you always agree wholeheartedly. And so this is what it sounds like is, hey, I understand, Scott, that you like such and such. And would you be open to hearing why some of their customers come to us? So now I'm acknowledging their existence. I'm acknowledging that they have a favor or something that's favorable to them. I'm not negating it. And I'm trying to be additive to that to say, hey, and I know you're looking at us. So let me tell a story about our prospects and customers and why they choose us over them. So that's one. So and versus but. The fun part of this is I wrote this chapter because I purposely wrote using and a lot in the book. And I did the count, and it's over 1,000 times I use the word and. I think I use the word but about 80.
Like a meta point within the book.
Right. And I purposely made sure that when I wrote that I used and, not but. And I didn't try to like, oh, let me get to the end and come up. I was just like, I got to the end and I'm like, oh, I should see what this is and see if that's ironic, like see if it's close or not. And then I was a little blown away. So that's one tactic. The other one is about negotiating with procurement, right? We've been around so long. I've been doing sales all my life, literally. And nobody ever taught us how to negotiate with procurement departments. And I've talked to some people at, Coca-Cola and Mercedes, like legit big procurement people. And I was shocked when I asked them, well, what don't we know about procurement? What should salespeople know? Because nobody ever teaches us. And they said, both separate conversations, they said, we want to talk to you way sooner than we do. They want to be engaged in the sales cycle as soon as possible. And the reason for that is because if they're having to do some competition, they got to go do their stuff. And if it's, if you wait till December 1st to get in front of them, and all of a sudden, so is everybody else. And now they're jammed and they don't want to work late either on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve and stuff like that. So that kind of blew my mind. And I said, well, what else should we know? And they said that, we're not there to hurt you on price. We have a job to do. So they're not there. So to be combative. And so the piece of advice I give in the book from having these conversations is very simple. When I have my first conversation with Scott, assuming Scott, you're the procurement person, my conversation starts a little bit, with a respect contract of, hey, Scott, before we jump into stuff, because I know we will, can you tell me what your role is here so I understand, like, are you here to shepherd me through just the pricing and negotiation? Are you, my shepherd for getting through legal? Is it all of it? Or is it, nope, it's just pricing? Like, so now I'm trying to talk to Scott to understand his role so that I don't come across combative, right? Like that I'm trying to work with him, which is what we all do anyway. Like that's the whole plan of sales. Nobody ever taught us this. So that's a really fun and favorite topic that people like to hear. So
I like that one. I mean, just a simple, you call it a respect contract or just doing some, renewed discovery on the procurement team because you did all this discovery on your buying team and they have certain KPIs and problems they're trying to solve. But this procurement professional has completely different problem that they're tasked to and KPIs. It might be, hey, we need to consolidate our tech stack, and they're just there to make sure that they're not using 3,000 different types of technology.
that could be it,
Or
right?
yeah, or it could be pricing. We've got a set amount that we're allowed to spend every year, and you need to understand that to be able to have an effective conversation. When from these interviews you've done, like how early are we talking? Like it could be difficult if you're like still not sure if it's a real opportunity. Maybe you're talking to a handful of folks. Like when did they suggest bringing procurement in? Like how far along in the deal cycle?
They both sort of agnostically said as soon as possible. And I said, well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you want to see the first demo? And they're like, sometimes they do, but rarely. But they, once it gets serious, they said, once it gets serious. And I said, does that mean when we've been shortlisted? And he said, and they both happen to be gentlemen. They both said, that's typically a good time. Once you're shortlisted, that's a good time. The challenge is our champion, our person that we're talking to doesn't know that that's what procurement wants. Nobody's taught them that, hey, it's okay. They've been taught to not get it to procurement until much later, right? So as a salesperson, we have to, be able to say things like, our happiest and most successful clients have actually brought us in once we've been shortlisted, so that should we be chosen, things can go at a faster pace and nobody's hounding each other. They're not hounding you to get more information from me. I'm not hounding you to figure out where the thing is in the process. So how do you feel about that? When are y'all normally comfortable introducing someone? Right. So again, it's positioning it in a way that is non-threatening to the to your buyer, your champion, saying, I'm not trying to go around you. I'm just trying to say, I need to know what your process is. And here's what we found other people who are really successful and happy working with us have found out. And again, that's the reason we say those two words, successful and happy, is because who doesn't want to be both successful and happy? Every buyer wants to be successful and happy. So the key, as I talk about all the time, is I don't care if your champion says, no, we're not ready. What I care about is, did you ask? Right? You got to ask. And even if your champion says, no, we're not ready, then the question becomes, great. So I don't become pushy. When is the appropriate time? So now I've opened this door up to negotiating the process and doing discovery on the process. As you said a minute ago, we're all really good at discovery on the buying team, but there's a legal process, there's a buyer's process, there's a buyer's experience, then there's, the procurement process, the approval process. Like there's 100 processes that nobody talks about. And so that's the big piece, is ask about it in a way that maybe you can get your foot in the door.
Yeah. And I imagine too, the advantage it would give you if you're even engaging with procurement 2 weeks before your competitor. That's 2 weeks to understand the process, build a relationship, build that trust. So you're already out ahead. And really all it takes is, it's coming anyway. So it's just asking the hard question a little bit sooner, which can feel uncomfortable, but that's kind of what we're
So
in the
that's my
art of
question,
doing.
right? So is it hard because it's hard, or is it hard because we just haven't done it enough? Right? It's kind of like cold calling, right? Your first job out of sales, if you're cold calling, it's hard because you don't know. You've never done it. Eventually, you do enough reps, it's not that hard anymore, unless you really decide you hate cold calling and you don't want to be in sales. Then it's always hard. Or if you're in a slump, yeah, it can feel hard when you're in those moments. So I always question, like, is it really hard, or is it harder because we're just uneducated? Which I think it's more that, and nobody's taught us. Right? I didn't know this. I didn't know this till 2 years ago. I figured it out along the way.
Yeah. And we're all scared of the unknown, especially when the unknown has negative connotations.
The last thing, can I say one more thing about procurement?
Of course.
They're not as scary as one thinks. If we've done a good job in discovery and we've gotten to real economic impact, how painful is it at a dollars and cents level? How have we numberized the pain? Even when procurement says they're not going to lower that budget, it's okay to walk away from procurement and say, hey, Scott, sounds like we're a little bit of a pause. Let me go back to Sarah and see if she has more money somewhere else she can pull it. So I can go back to my champion, because oftentimes they have other funds they could pull it from. Right? So it's just because procurement says no doesn't necessarily mean it's totally no. You still have a shot. And I think we've all been, again, conditioned and trained to, oh shit, procurement said no. Now all of a sudden I got to go to my CEO and founder and, give this deal that I don't want to deal, when you might, but, and this is a good but maybe you can go talk to your champion to see if there's additional dollars somewhere. They're not as scary as people think. I just think we're uneducated.
I think those are great tactical tips. Let's do one more, and then we'll move on.
One more tip is about pricing, right? So how do you deliver pricing is really important. And it's pretty simple. You just say, you know, the cost of our service, Scott, is $15,379. How does that feel? Because all I care about is how does that Scott feel about the price? I don't care about, well, how does that sound or how does that look? Pricing, no purchase we ever make has a look. It has an emotional feeling. And we know this because that's the reason all the candy bars are, you know, right by the aisle, right by the checkout stand. It's emotional, it's impulse. So you lay out the number and then you just ask, how does that feel? And every answer you get is going to be a great answer. That feels about right. That feels good. That feels high. I don't like that answer, but now I can figure out, well, what does it mean when they say high? Like what were you expecting? You know, what else have you seen in the marketplace that, you know, to say that? And every now and then I actually get someone who says, oh, that's less than we budgeted. And I'm like, shit. Like, ah, damn. But it's always an emotional purchase. And I think that's a key piece. And it's that one moment where you can really see where you stand. Because when you use any other word, they'll throw out this word. Oh, well, it's, you know, they've been taught how to resist the word budget. They've been taught how to resist the word price. They've been taught to ask for a discount. So anything that easily takes you down that path, they're already got their blockers up because they've been conditioned and trained to do it that way. Nobody's trained them how to ignore the phrase, how does that feel?
Yeah, I like that. You can't help but just kind of answer that honestly. You know, you kind of like it's like an impulse. You're just like, well, it feels this way.
The other thing is, and I say this all the time, is stop it with the pricing of $5,000, $10,000, you know, $20,000, $25,000. As soon as I hear that number, you just picked it out of the air. Like I already know. Come up with some obscure, bizarre number. And part of the reason for that is one, we all like odd numbers, hence the number I chose. However, when I say it's $15,379, they're so busy thinking about what is that? Well, that's a weird number. That when I say, how does that feel? They don't even recognize what I'm doing. Like they can't, like, so I've distracted them so much that they're more compelled to answer that question.
What's your take on, so a lot of times I find, at least in like, you know, we'll call it mid-market SMB deals, pricing discussions will happen like kind of at the end of maybe your discovery call, maybe it's your demo, and you don't have a ton of time to get into it. And let's say they do throw up like a big objection. They're like, oh, that's way out of the ballpark. Do you suggest the sellers you coach, do you want to engage with that in real time and in the maybe like 10 minutes you have left and try and come up with a solution? Or do you prefer be like, okay, that's great. Let's, you know, table this. I'll go back and come back with some other offerings, or how do you suggest having the pricing, the like meat and potatoes of the pricing discussion?
So a couple of things here. So big picture, and it's talk about in the book, you know, that's an objection. And we're taught to handle objections. Nobody wants to be handled, right? We have to marinate in that objection in that moment. So yes, in that moment, I need to have a conversation around, and I change the word all the time, commercial terms. It's not about pricing. It's about commercial terms. Oh, Scott, I understand you feel those commercial terms are a little higher than you were expecting. Remember, commercial terms is saying there's a give and take here, that we're not a commodity, right? That there's this ability to, you're getting some level of service and value in exchange for compensation. So subtly, that's one of those little things. Like I'm really big on these little subtle terms that I think can help. The other thing is, one of the challenge I see too is people don't leave enough time at the end of the demo. They haven't done a good respect contract before the demo. They haven't set an agenda to say, we're going to talk about commercial terms. And so pricing can become that doorknob question with only 3 minutes to go. Right? So as a salesperson, we have to pre-plan our call and how we're going to cover things, which could some cases rewriting scripts. Anyway, So if you don't have enough time, that's the first problem. Changing it to commercial terms is the second. To answer that question, the answers that you can give, depending on context, are things like, okay, what were you expecting? Okay. I bet a more favorite question I ask is, oh, okay, Scott, I see you think that's high. What else have you seen in the marketplace? Hard stop. I don't say anything after that. It's a very short, simple. What else have you seen in the marketplace? It's going to give me indications of competition. It's going to give me indications about how much they've actually looked at. It's going to give me indication about pricing. It's going to give me, because I need to know where all that stuff is. So that's a piece of how I handle it. What else have you seen in the marketplace? So that's one way. Now the pressure is different in the scenario you set up where it's, I've got the last few minutes of a meeting. If I'm actually having a pricing conversation, I'm very comfortable saying to people, hey, Scott, our pricing's based on what the market dictates. So I'm curious how you'd like to proceed from here. Because again, nobody knows how to answer that question. No CFO, no CEO, no VP, no SVP knows how to answer the question of this is what the market dictates. Finally, if you have to discount, Scott, there are 3 ways you can earn that we can both leverage commercial terms to our advantage. Right? We can offer a 2% discount on a multi-year contract. We can offer another 2% discount on additional seats. And we can offer a 5% discount on prepayment of the contract in full. Which one would you like? So now they can earn the discounts. And I've started my discounting really low. I'm at 9% right there. I'd probably throw in a fourth one that says, and there's a fourth one, Scott, we do a 2% if we can get a customer quote and a case study from you. Now all of a sudden now I got stuff to negotiate with. Timing of that conversation is critical. So in the scenario you said where it's the end of the meeting, I'm a little cautious about where I would use that particular tactic. But all these things are things that we shouldn't be surprised about and we can easily navigate through. I'll shut up now. I've been ranting for a bit.
No, I love it. I love it. And the give to get anytime you're discounting or making concessions in a negotiation, you're in a position to ask for something, and I think that's super important to do. And it sets kind of the precedent for the whole relationship. You don't want just them to feel like they can, take. It's always give to get, give first. But no, I love it. Well, excited to read the rest of I guess that leaves 10 tactics, but I want to quickly talk to you about, your views on kind of a lack of communication skills in the sales profession, and that, AI is not going to come and fix that. What are your thoughts there?
So I think there's 2 questions in there. So I'll start with the lack of communication skills. Until the buyer says they're willing to spend a certain amount of money without actually talking to a human being on a product or service, AI is not going to take over until the buyer says they're ready to do that. Now, we're being conditioned to it. I remember when people were freaking out about putting, their credit card number in a computer back in the late 90s to buy something. Like I remember the first year, oh my God, retail sales, they didn't even have the word e-tail. Retail sales are going to top $1 billion. Like that's a day now. Like Amazon makes that in a day, or whatever. But so I think we're being conditioned to this piece. We'll now buy a $100,000 car without even test driving it. We'll go do it online, right? The difference though in B2B is everything's a consensus buy. There are multiple humans making the decision and engaged in the decision. So it's very hard for AI to take over that part of the role. Can it? Maybe. I just don't know. If I've got 5 people who've got to give approval, somebody's going to want to. When do we think all 5 people are never going to want to talk to a human? I don't know. So I'm less concerned there, which means that people need to know how to have a conversation, right? All these little tactics I've been giving out, you have to earn the right to do that, right? Like there's the mental game of courage and confidence. A lot of times I talk to people and they're like, well, we want to improve negotiation skills and this and this. And I'm like, well, A, it's not that. They need better discovery skills. And B, do you think they need to improve on their courage and confidence? Not that they don't have it, they just need to improve on it. For example, the procurement conversation. We just don't have a lot of confidence in it because we haven't done it. Therefore, without confidence, our courage is a little less. We may be experts at demos and discovering that. It's when it's that new thing. So that's the communication skill that I think matters. And I think it's important to teach the reps and teach everybody that there's a difference between having the script around a certain part of their pitch or objections that they're marinating in and sounding scripted. I don't ever want someone to sound scripted. That's stupid. That's terrible. So authenticity matters. And so I think that's the piece where the humanity has been lacking. Nobody's teaching these people how to do it. Everybody's still rushing, as we always do. We rush to the tool, right? We rush to the sales lofts of the world, right? We rush to that, and then we move to spray and pray. How fast can we do it? Which is the nature of startups as a whole, right? You got to get there and you got to grow fast and you got to scale fast. So, it's a double-edged sword. Like, on the one hand, they want humanity. On the other hand, growth at all costs kind of a thing. So, so I think that's the piece. And I think that's, conversational sales, the stuff I teach and some of the other, great trainers out there, Barrows and some of the others who are good friends of mine, this is what we teach people to do. How do you earn the right to ask the questions that need to be asked, and when to do it? So, the other part of that question I think you were asking was about AI, but I don't know if that's where you want to go in general.
I mean, we can go there if you've got a take on how this is all going to shake out. I agree with that. The sales professional will be around for at least the next 2 generations, at least as long as I'll be alive. Probably my kids will be alive. But how does this all shake out? What do you think the impact of AI is going to be on sales?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen this game before, right? We've seen this movie, right? It came in the industrialization of the automobile manufacturing, right? And the work line, and then it came with the robots into the factories, and then and along the lines, then it came to the farming industry and the agricultural world, right? Like, this is not something we should be shocked about. We're just, as salespeople, we're just like, oh, now I'm really afraid. I think the low end jobs, and by low end, I mean like the task oriented jobs, things like SDRs, that will probably be some of the first to go. And what I think will happen is you'll have fewer people doing it, but they'll be managing and navigating the machines a little bit, right? Still putting that human eye onto this, right? So I think that'll be one of the first. Some of the SMB reps, I think, will be also taken away, depending on how the purchase goes, right? If it's a true, as I think about the mom and pop, the small businesses of the world, in many cases, I think a lot of people in that world want to talk to a human. So some of those SMB roles are actually be really around for a while. A certain percentage will not. Like that's what happens. Mid-market, I think we're better as you get into more decision makers. I think you're a little safer. And if it were me and I were still in sales, I would be trying to learn how to become an enterprise sales rep for the next 2 or 3 years, because ain't nobody spending $250,000, $300,000, $400,000, $1 million without talking to a human, right? So I think that's a piece. I think the sales manager job will be interesting. There are coaching tools out there that can. And I'm not even talking about the gongs in the course, but like you could say, this is our process. We use neat selling or medic or medpick or whatever, and it'll score the call for you and give you the feedback. So, imagine if I have a rep, particularly who are all over the country or the world, if I can get them coaching call feedback on every single call, oh my gosh, because it doesn't happen even if you're all in one office, it doesn't happen more than once or twice a week. So that'll be interesting on the sales manager side. I've seen one tool that will actually allow reps and managers to have their one-on-ones. Like a rep can say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And then the machine will say, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? So the rep can actually get some solid advice. And I've talked to the people about this, like, are reps willing to go in and say, I'm struggling this week on the machine? Are they comfortable with that? And he's like, Yeah, you'd be surprised. They are. Like, it's crazy. So that's happening. So that, everything's going to enhance for a while. Some things will start to get peeled off. I think we're making a mad dash for the SDR to be replaced by AI right now in, February, March of 24, whenever this comes out. And I think it's an over execution. I don't think that the tool is there yet. It's still more artificial than intelligent. There's a reason our fighter planes in the United States and Canada still have a pilot, because there still needs to be some human oversight. There just has to be, right? If you're going to do anything with any level of humanity, and I'm not suggesting war is a humanity thing, I get it. There still has to be a human oversight to this. And so that's going to be the part that's interesting. Not when does AI take over, but how do humans navigate that and manage the oversight?
Yeah. We'll have top sellers sort of augmented with AI, not replaced. And what I was hearing was, align yourself as a seller to solving more complex problems. The more complex the problem you solve, the better chance that you'll be around, longer. And then on the flip side, you also mentioned, which I thought was a great call out, is you could also align yourself with a buyer who is less sophisticated, because they'll typically not feel comfortable doing things using an AI bot or going directly on the website.
And believe me, we're still going to get forced into it. Nobody likes to get on the phone onto the chat bot with the cable company to work out your billing issue. It's like, operator, press 0, attendant, what word do I got to use to talk to a human? Even though the bot piece might actually solve your problem faster, we just want to talk to humans. So I think generationally, that's where it'll change. My kids, when you have kids, they're going to grow up very differently. They're going to grow up like, I don't mind talking to a bot. That's how I do it all the time anyway. So it's to your point, it's 20 years before that, but I see a mad dash. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if AI becomes the next blockchain. 2 years ago, everybody was all about blockchain. Like, I don't hear anything about it anymore.
You might again. It looks like another hype cycle is coming. Bitcoin's having in April, so I'm sure we'll hear all about it as that blows up again. But
It'll probably have
agree.
some AI component.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. But there's always these hype cycles, and there is always applications that do rise to the top, but that's usually overblown to begin with. I also thought your view on sales managers. I think the sales managers of the future, like right now, almost overpaid to just like look at dashboards and things, and like a lot of that living in reports and dashboards and things will just go away, because we'll have everything will be automated. We'll have all of that will roll up automatically, and I think it'll be a good change where sales managers will look a lot more like a mental performance coach on like a sports team, where they deeply care about helping their team achieve like peak flow state.
How many managers do you know ever got training on how to do that? Like, that's been the problem with management all along, right? And to your point about this dashboard thing, my favorite thing to say to founder, well, we, got rid of them. They weren't doing a good job coaching. I'm like, great. How many dashboards do they have to oversee? How many reports are they looking at every day? Which tells you that you don't have enough managers, right? You need, it's about 1 to 6 or 7, right? 1 manager to 7 reps. Everybody thinks 10 is the magic number because it's a nice round number, but it doesn't work, right? Like, it doesn't, in that role, overseeing revenue people who are in a very task oriented regard. I don't mean SDRs, even AEs, like where you're constantly looking at what's going on. You can't spend enough time with that human being, right? Like, imagine if, Scott, I know you, when you have kids, you're going to have 7 or 8 of them, right? So, how are you going to have quality time with all 7 or 8?
7 or 8, that seems like too many, but who knows? I seem to do things to the extreme, so I wouldn't count it out.
I was just joking, but I didn't know that.
All right. So I want to quickly go. This is awesome, man. It's been fun chopping it up with you, but I want to quickly go to a listener question. And thanks everyone for always sending in great questions. This comes from a founder, and I know you work with a ton of founders. You have your whole career. What are the biggest mistakes you see founders make, and how can I circumvent them? Is the question.
The first one is that no matter how good you think you are or your service, 99,999 times out of 100,000, it's never going to go as fast as you think it should. And the second thing, how do you fix that? Is stop believing that you actually think you can break the mold. You cannot. You cannot, and you will not. Right. And if people are pissed at that and they want to challenge me, then find me on LinkedIn and challenge me, and I'll bet you. I'll bet $100 to anybody on that one. 100 American, not Canadian, by the way. I think that's one thing that founders do. I think the other one is founders, particularly the technical founders, and it's through no fault, it's just how they're wired. They love to explain what they do. Well, that's not what anybody cares. Nobody cares what you do, right? They care about what pain you solve, right? GTM fund, sure. Oh, we're a VC venture-backed company and we do. No, the pain to solve is that we're looking out for different and unique startups who don't need us to bring in 20 million or 40 million, right? Like, that's a pain you solve. And there's a ton of startups out there who want that level of a thing. What does Richard do? I'm not a sales trainer. I teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask and when. So talk about the pain you solve in relation to painting a picture of your buyer and what they're struggling with. And I don't mean what keeps them up at night. Like, in their day-to-day, what pain are you solving for them? So that's another one. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Don't hire one salesperson at a time. Hire 2 to 3. It's a waste of time if you do one. It's a lot of energy to train people. And if you do one and they bail, you're 6 months behind on the next one. So hire 2 or 3. And it doesn't mean you're committing to 3 full year salaries. It means you're committing to 90 days, 1 year salary, because in 90 days, you'll figure out what the challenge, whether or not it's working. So, and then the last one is, please don't go read a book. I mean, you can read mine, The Seller's Journey, now available on Amazon. Sorry, had to do it. But don't think that you can read the book and all of a sudden become better than your VP of sales. You can't. You're not. You won't. Any more than I could go read a book about engineering and and do a coding class and think I could code. Like, it's not as simple as you think. So those are the ones that I say all founders are guilty of. So, but you know me, I can rant on that one for a long time.
I like it. That last one is big. I think there's sometimes founders can fall into the trap of they're really good at one thing and they're really good. So often, like, they're, in the top 0.1 percentile on this one thing, and then they can they try and translate that into other things. They get overconfident in other areas, and you need to find people that are as good as the thing you're good at in their thing.
Here's my advice for the founders. If you think you're that good at sales, how much coaching and leadership advice are you going to go get? When are you going to hire a coach when you go to 20 employees, 100 employees, 500 employees? Because if you think you're good at sales, you don't need help learning how to manage people. And I guarantee you, so many founders suck at managing people. They just are terrible at it. Why? Because you got to sell the team on what you're doing, right? And you've got to motivate them in a healthy way. And so that's a balance for founders to think about, as, why do you think you're so good at sales when you can't even, hire the right people? You fired your VP of sales after 16 months. Great. You're an expert at sales. Well, you chose the wrong guy for the job. Yeah. What makes you think you're going to do a better job this time? So anyway, all right, I'll get off the founders. So, by the way, that's what you get. If you like Richard, like, I'm not going to hold it back. So,
We love you, my friend. All right. Final 2 questions as we wrap up. I always keep these the same. They're intentionally vague, so you can take them any way you want. First question is, what is one widely held belief that revenue leaders or founders believe to be true that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
I think that the lack of teaching their managers how to manage is a big problem. Very few sales leaders ever got any managing people. We all got promoted because we were good at sales, we were good at cold calling, we were good at handling objections. Maybe we helped with the interview and a little bit of onboarding, and then we raised our hand and said, I'd like to be a manager, not having a clue of what it's like. So I think that's a big piece that's constantly missing. Yet, who gets blamed? The managers. Meanwhile, the company hasn't given any resources to that. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I see this a lot too, is expecting things to change when you don't actually train and coach your reps. I can't tell you how many clients I had last year who were like, well, we think we could just do this on our own. I'm like, really? What's your process look like? Tell me about it. And they think that they can save money by not spending on training, forgetting, which then means they don't believe in training. That's what it really says. So I think that's a big myth. I also think too, sales leaders, please stop saying this shit. Please stop saying, oh, if we close one more deal when we work with this sales trainer, it pays for itself. No, it doesn't. If I come in and I'm training your team and I don't make every one of your reps close 5 to 6 more deals per year or per cycle, then I have failed. Not this, hey, you cost X. If we get 2 deals, it pays for itself. No, that's a horrible way to look at shit. So stop looking at things that way. If you spend money on something like a training or any kind of program or any tool or whatever, you should expect a 10x return.
And compounding, ideally over many years.
And I talk about that like, okay, well, what's the lifetime value of each of those 5 new customers for your reps? Because it should be 3 years. So now that those 5 deals that a rep does, that's 15x, right? So agreed 100%.
Final one is everyone's looking for things that are working in this environment. What is one thing that is working today for you or for the companies that you're working with?
I think you have to lean in to understand where the right places are to use AI. And then you also have to lean in making sure that there's more role playing. The one thing that works more than anything else is coaching and role playing. And I don't mean hire me, I mean yourself. If you aren't role playing with every one of your reps, or your reps aren't role playing with each other, or whatever it is, they're not going to get better, right? If you think that they're going to get better by having more conversations, sure, but you could accelerate that. If you only get into 5 sales conversations a week, how good are you? What happens if you did 3 a day as role plays? All of a sudden now you've done 15 of practice. So that's the one thing that I know works. Like everybody's sales cycle is longer. Everybody's sales cycle is taking time. Everybody's budget is being cut. We hear all this stuff, yet nobody's taking the time to teach people how to have the conversation around it, how to marinate in it and have these conversations and get there. So please, more role playing for your team.
You can actually marry those two things you're talking about now. I've seen these like AI role-playing software things that will build you like a scenario, whether it's cold calling or doing discovery, which is pretty cool.
I work and advise on some of them, but I'll be conscious to be, agnostic. But yes, go find them. There's tons of them.
Those are super cool. Richard, you're the man. Thank you for hanging out with me. This was a super fun discussion and super excited for your book to drop. If people want to follow you, best way on LinkedIn, Twitter, where can they find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is good, but here's where I'm different than every other person you've ever spoken to, Scott. Get a pencil, everybody. 415-596-9149, 415-596-9149. That's my real cell phone number. It's the one that my kids ignore every time I try to call them. It's the same number that Scott can text me on. So, text me ahead of time to let me know you heard us on the GTM podcast. So I'll answer, but
you might regret that, man. You know that 35,000 people listen to this a month now. You might get a lot of people calling you.
I'd be shocked if more than 5 people call. They don't. Like, yes, I do this all the time. Do you know how many times I've given out my phone? Every podcast I'm on, I give it out. I can assure you, people are afraid to call. So there's the challenge, everybody. Blow up my phone with 35,000 numbers. And then, of course, that's good for me anyway, right? So, or just find me on LinkedIn, Richard Harris, and the book at thesellersjourney.co, or on Amazon, The Seller's Journey by Richard Harris. So
beautiful. Awesome, brother. Well, good hanging. And to all the listeners, appreciate you rocking with us today. I always say it, but listening is one thing. Take some of these tactics and actually go execute on them. Help grow your career, help grow your business. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.